hallway that it doesn't get any better to spend a Friday afternoon talking about music, does it? Thanks to Catherine and Peter for having us here and creating this nice little space that we can talk about music today. And we're going to be talking about creating a scene, and we've got a pretty good scene going on here, I think. It's so nice to see people like Kelly Lee and my old friend Rob Frayne here, and so many of you that I haven't met today. That's it's just great. So my name is James Hale. I'm from Downbeat Magazine. I also write for SoundstageExperience.com, which, as I was just telling Rob, is actually a great set of sites, worldwide sites that are actually based here in Ottawa. So if you haven't checked out the Soundstage network yet, please do. There's lots of great music coverage on there. We have a great panel to talk about this idea of networking and audience development in the digital age. Let me introduce them. At the far end, we have a man who's told me not to worry about mispronouncing his last name, so he's an intermediate friend of mine, Reiner Michael? Yeah. He comes to us from Cologne, Germany, where he began his career as a musician in 1976. He's the artistic director of the European Center for Jazz and Contemporary Music, also director of the Moors Festival, and radio and television producer. Rainbow Robert is a native of Montreal, which explains why it's Robert. And she's best known for her 22 years at the Vancouver International Jazz Festival and Coastal Jazz, where she now curates programming. She's also curated the Guelph Jazz Festival and is one of the driving forces behind Jazz Festivals Canada, which represents more than 20 of this country's leading festivals. Jordan David is an Ottawa native who has been responsible for a broad range of projects, most of which operate outside the mainstream. He's the co-founder of the music and arts collective Music Art People, which specializes in providing spaces where artists from different backgrounds and disciplines can come together and create. And he's also a talent buyer and stage manager for Queen Street Fair, which is a new venue here in Ottawa. And finally, to my left is Jan Ole's Otnæs, who is the artistic director of Oslo's Molded Jazz, which presents some 150 concerts a year. He's also the president of the European Jazz Network and a member of the Norwegian Arts Council. He founded the Northern Norwegian Jazz Forum in 1969 and booked Keith Jarrett for his first concert, and he's never looked back. he's probably dealt with easier artists ever since then. Anyway, we are going to talk about creating a space, and I wanted to ask Rainbow the opening question, and I hope you all will jump in, and I will make time at the end for questions. But if something that we say up here spurs something that you want to get out there, by all means put your hand up, and I'll try to see you through the gloom and call on you. So, question is, music scenes are as distinctive as the cities and the non-geographic communities they inhabit. For example, there's only one Austin, Texas, and there's just as though there's no other place as San Francisco was in 1966, or Harlem when it gave birth to bebop in the 1940s. So the question really is, given that nothing is exactly the same, what are the foundational elements for building a thriving scene in the 2020s? A scene that nourishes artists and builds audiences. And I will turn to Rainbow to enlighten us.
Well, it's my firm belief that we're defined by the way that we treat people, and being welcoming and respectful to everybody who's involved in this very multi-layered ecology that we're all a part of, I think is the key to building a scene. And as this relates to the overarching digital topic, I think we have an even more urgent task at hand. How do we maintain our humanity with all of these robots between us? How do we enhance the ways that we communicate with each other in order to offset the fact that we're so disconnected and often communicating from so far away? I believe that in terms of creating the scene in your own town and serving the community, that every conversation that we have defines us. The way that we treat the people that we're talking to in any problem-solving moment is what defines us. And I think that we have a unique ability to really change things by making people feel welcome, by making artists feel respected. And I think that the real power that exists as human beings is that we can, in our own way, help to elevate the already superb music that we are serving as curators and festival producers by just infusing the whole experience with just paramount levels of respect. And I think that what comes out of this is if, you know, without asking, if you happen to know what kind of a bottle of wine somebody wants, if you see somebody who, you know, just wants a bunch of fresh radishes and somebody goes out and grabs them for this person, these kinds of simple acts that are very much the best that we have as human beings, I think make people feel so at home and so appreciated that the music comes across in a different way. And then the audience responds in a different way. And everybody knows that they came to the right gig. And, you know, like, people aren't sitting there wondering, am I being reached by the music? And then artists aren't on stage wondering, are we reaching people with our music? The artists feel fantastic. They're like, oh my God, how did they know that was the bottle of wine I wanted? Everybody feels great. The music comes across like gangbusters, and everybody sits there thinking, oh my God, this is how I want a musical experience to feel. So, you know, my name's Rainbow. It's a bit of a, you know, a hippie sentiment, surprise. But I think that the quality of the experience that we aim to create is built upon respect and the ways that we can underscore that respect for each other at every turn.
Yeah.
Anyone else want to jump in on that? She said it all.
Yeah, I just want to add to that. I think it's equally as important to really focus on the audiences who are coming to these shows. More often than not, it's the audience who, you know, could be a musician, could be a writer, a photographer. So just keeping an open mind, and as presenters, we're always looking for the next best thing. But the next best thing could be in front of us. So an example, I think of you know, David Mancuso, 1970. This is New York disco era. He was throwing parties in a space called the Loft, and people who were going to these events, Frankie Knuckles, talking about like Dave Morales. These guys went on to shape the sounds of dance music. So I think it's kind of like, it's interesting to know that no matter what we're doing, people are there and willing to sort of share their talents. So just trying to offer a space for those people to do so. I know here in Ottawa, we're very lucky to have you know, great folk scene, great jazz scene, a lot of things happening in the city, and I think it's important for us to go and experience it, like go and actually support these artists and support these scenes, because if we don't do it, who's going to do it? You know, we can complain about there's nothing to do, or I wish this would happen. You know, you have the power to do things in your city. That's the biggest thing as well. Like, you can wait for someone to do it, or you can just do it yourself and try it. It could be in a small space, it could be in a basement, it could be in a cafe. But more often than not, I find these are the best experiences, where it's intimate, and from there you can grow and, you know, become a jazz festival. So yeah, just not underestimating the audience, and also not underestimating yourself, because we're often waiting for permission to do these things, but sometimes you have to pull the trigger and just do it and learn from it and grow.
Jan, you know, as I said, you've been presenting shows since 1969, and I think, you know, from our perspective over here in North America, you know, when we look at around the world at scenes, you know, the Norwegian scene often seems like kind of a model for a lot of things, because it's always been kind of vital. I was asking you about, you know, your experience in given that space of time, but also, like, what do you see as the Norwegian scene? What have been the elements that have made it come together and made it as successful and influential as it has become?
Well, I used to point at 3-4 factors that has been super important in Norway. Already in the early 50s, we got a Norwegian Jazz Federation that has been a very well organized system of jazz clubs, festivals, regional jazz centers, big bands, and musicians. And we were quite early well connected with the authorities and got funding from public funding. First from the local, and after some years also from the Ministry of Culture and from the Arts Council. The second one is that we have a generation of musicians that came up with ECM in the late 60s, Jan Garbari, Terje Rypdal, Jon Christensen, Arild Andersen, and also Karin Krogh. And they recruited new musicians. A lot of the guys that they recruited also became big artists on ECM, and they recruited new ones. So ECM and the generation that came up in the late 60s has been super important. And then we got a jazz education in Trondheim, which has been a very vital thing that helped us a lot. And for the venue that I run today, Victoria, the national jazz scene, in Oslo from the 60s and up till today, we had a lot of good venues presenting jazz, but they come and went away. We never had anything stable. So to get funding for a stable scene, we presented an idea for the government in the late 90s that we have a national opera, we have a national theater, we have a national gallery. We should have a national scene for jazz. And it took us 6 years to convince the authorities that we should have a jazz scene. So now we have Victoria, national jazz scene, been running now for 12 years. We have stable funding from the government. We are able to present a lot of different music on this scene. And the idea when we created this was to embrace the whole jazz community in Oslo and also in the rest of the country. So we have a series of jazz by kids, not for kids, but young musicians playing. They're from 6-8 to 13, 14 years old. Then we have
that feeling that you're, I mean, you could even look at this through the digital sphere. These are like holodeck experiences for anyone who watched Star Trek. You know, you want to push the button, okay, I want to be in a jazz club and hear something that's going to really change the way that I think. Or now I want to be on a sunny field with a picnic basket, listening to some gorgeous music from somewhere completely across the world. And I think that's really what we're creating. We're creating these experiences for artists and audiences, and for all of those of us who work together to make these things happen, where, you know, we're in a world where we need to tap back into our inspiration. We're in a world that's filled with challenges and turmoil, and if we can create these small vignettes from moment to moment where we feel like we've been on a number of journeys, that we've joined together with the same people within a bunch of different contexts over the course of a day or a week or an entire festival, I think the way that music can transport us together to a place where we feel connected again as human beings is really where we're trying to get to. And I feel that that goal is the same either within a small, cozy suite, like purely out there festival, or a festival that has many different layers that's creating a bunch of different feelings as you travel through the journey.
Jordan, you specialize in a lot of smaller you know, projects and a lot of DIY projects and you know, one might say, you know, if you looked at it from the outside, kind of marginalized projects, you know. How do you build from something that is specialized like that into a broader scheme? In other words, how do you bring audiences into what you're creating? Because, you know, if I was the cynical old journalist, oh wait, I am. You know, looking at one of your projects, I might say, oh, that's got a very niche kind of audience. What are the tools that you use, and what are the things that have been successful with you for building an audience from the scenes you create?
That's a great question. I think for me personally, like I said, you know, doing things in small spaces, there's a bit of a forgiveness to that. You know, if you know everyone's coming to your shows, you get that feedback right away. And again, feedback is so important. So if I were to do something in a small cafe, you know, we might be able to play a bit more, have a bit more freedom with the space and what we're doing, and then to, you know, extrapolate that and bring it to a space like the Ottawa Art Gallery. Well, you know, if you have that freedom to kind of explore and play, I think that's a big part of it. You know, you need to develop your skills and develop your audience as well. And I think, you know, things like streaming, these things help with sharing that message. But yeah, for me, I think a big part of that is just sort of, you know, whatever space it is, big or small, we just try to curate to that room and make it the best thing we can do possible. So we obviously utilize things like, you know, Instagram and YouTube and all the tools that we all know about. But I think, again, it's like, you know, can we record these sets? Can we put them on SoundCloud? You know, connect to the bigger audience that's out there. So, you know, I'm doing a niche thing in Ottawa, but the reality is, like, these are big things in the world, and to you it might seem like, you know, it's nothing, but some people it's their world. So I don't take it lightly, and I think it's one of those things where you have to realize your limitations, work with that, but be ready for the storm, be ready for that big opportunity when it comes. And when it does come, you've had that practice in small spaces to deliver on a bigger level.
Cool. Yeah. Jan, I mean, you started out, as I said, in 1969, and you know, and those of us of a certain age, or even maybe younger, kind of look back at the 60s as saying, like, that was the heyday of alternative music. That it was in the air. It was common, you know, culture in those days. But you have been successful now for 50 years. What changes have you gone through, and what tools have you found in terms of digital technology, since that's our overarching theme here? Have you discovered that translate to what you do, and how have you continued to be successful in terms of building audience?
I mean, digital tools is most important in marketing, as we're talking about in the former panel. So we did a research among our audiences 3 years ago and found that hardly anyone read ads in the newspapers. They get the information through these program books, through Facebook and through our website. That's the way. So we have cut the use of traditional media with 60%, and the audience still come. And one thing we have done since 2014 is to live stream 10 to 20 concerts per year. And online, when it happens, we have an audience of between 200 and 2,000. And a year after, some of these shows has been watched 50,000 times. So we spread the news, and we spread the
I think, you know, it's all ripples, and that we, you know, maintain our commitment and our passion about the thing, and love it. When we love it.
Remember that record called New Thing at Newport? This is New Thing at Mesopotamia. Another question? I think we have time for one more. No? We've covered it all.
I mean, I'll ask one last
All right.
question. If nobody has a Hollywood questions, I will offer the question. I guess my kind of final question is for all of you. Is you all come from totally different scenes, and is there something you would impart that you think works in your scene? You know, I think there's always, like, the grass is always greener somewhere else in a way. And having spent some time in New York, even in New York, which is a great hub of improvised music, musicians are struggling like crazy, yet they still go there and they still do this. But it's not an easy place to do it. So I know musicians would have something to say about, from there, what works and what doesn't. So I guess my question is, would you impart something that works from your scene? That's a great takeaway.
We can do this over a beer later, too. I know it's true.
I've got a tiny piece, which is for a lot of festivals, or something that I hear when I'm talking to artists about how the local art is handled within the context of festivals. Most festivals, and by design, have to set up all of the touring work, and then they fit the local work in between. And the level of respect with which the local work is seen and treated and given prominence within the program, I think, is super important. And as programmers, obviously, we have to do all of the highly complex touring stuff first, but in my mind, I feel like I'm often selecting that stuff in order to feed inspiration into the local scene. And then the next step is to find out, like, who of these people is going to most inspire some of the most inspiring people in the local scene, and then putting them all together. So that actually creates a scene where the scene is growing, the inspiration from some of the greatest music that's happening in the world is brought back in service of and as an offering to the local community, and that the local community is where we live, and it is the most important. So for me, I'm very fortunate enough to work with artists from all over the world, and there's so much music, beautiful music in the world, but my heart lives for the local artists, and I really like the way it sounds in my town. Like when the festival's not happening, I go out to gigs and you can hear all of those streams, you can hear that music, the sound in the city changes, and the people become more inspired, and it makes the place a really nice place to live.
At the risk of sounding like I'm, patting a bunch of people in the back here, from an Ottawa perspective, I'm looking at the room, and I'm seeing a lot of examples of what you're asking about. I'm seeing Rob Frayne, I'm seeing Kelly Lee, and yourself, Peter, and Judy, and I think what it takes is that people put place over, I don't want to say place over career, but they value the place they're in, and they bring their art to the place they're in. And Reiner said about the choice between art and programming for success. By choosing to be in a place that may not be, New York City or Berlin, by choosing Ottawa or Oslo or wherever you are and staying there and making your art there, I think that makes such a tremendous statement on a personal level, and trying to build the audience from within, like saying, I'm going to stay here because this is my home, and I will make my art here. Can we hear it for our panelists?